My daughter-in-law lost her custody, her money, and her father's freedom because she thought a parking lot was a safe place to bury my son. That's the ending. This is the moment it began. I found my son sleeping in his car, with my grandsons in the back seat of an airport parking lot in March. Not camping, not between places. Sleeping. Curled forward in the driver's seat, like his body had finally shut itself down, while two 5-year-old boys were folded together under a single blanket behind him. I had flown in from Vancouver to surprise him for his birthday. One night. That was the plan. I parked in long-term at Toronto Pearson because I wasn't planning to stay. I wasn't planning to discover that my son had been erased from his own life. I noticed the Honda because the windows were fogged from the inside. That shouldn't happen in a parking lot unless someone's been breathing in there for hours. Or days. I slowed down, told myself not to jump to conclusions. That's what reasonable people do right before reality punches them in the throat. Then I saw movement in the back seat. Small shapes. Knees, feet. I walked closer, and my heart did something strange. It didn't race. It didn't pound. It just sank. Heavy. Like it knew exactly what it was about to see and didn't bother warning me. Michael was asleep in the front seat, beard untrimmed, jacket pulled tight like it wasn't enough. And behind him were Nathan and Oliver, my grandsons, faces pressed together, lips cracked from dry air, one thin blanket trying to do the job of a roof. In March, in Canada, in an airport parking lot, I knocked on the window. Michael's eyes snapped open. For half a second, he didn't recognize me. Then he did, and something flickered across his face that I'd never seen before. Not relief, not surprise. Shame. He opened the door slowly, careful not to wake the boys, like he could still protect them from me if he moved quietly enough. "Dad," he said. His voice was rough, worn down, like a man who hadn't been allowed to speak freely in a long time. "What are you doing here?" he asked. I stared at him. I didn't answer right away because I was too busy cataloging what had been taken from him. Weight, confidence, the way he used to stand. "What am I doing here?" I said finally. "Michael, why are you living in your car with my grandsons?" He looked away. "It's complicated," he muttered. That word made my jaw tighten. "Complicated?" I said. "You're sleeping in a parking lot with 5-year-old kids. That's not complicated. That's someone deciding you don't matter." The boys started to stir. Nathan rubbed his eyes and saw me through the glass. "Grandpa," that single word cut deeper than anything Michael had said. I smiled because I had to. Because that's what you do when children are involved, and the truth is too heavy for their hands. "Hey, buddy," I said. "How about breakfast, huh?" Michael tensed, like he wanted to stop me. Like he was afraid that if I stayed any longer, everything he'd been holding together with duct tape would finally come apart. An hour later, my grandsons were laughing over pancakes in the airport, sticky with syrup, happy in the way kids get when they think this is all just an adventure. Michael sat across from me with a coffee he didn't touch. "Tell me everything," I said. And that's when I learned how efficiently a family with money can erase a man. I didn't raise my voice when Michael finally started talking. I didn't interrupt him either. I just sat there across from my son in an airport cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and syrup and listened to him explain, piece by piece, how he'd dismantled his own life trying to be a good husband and a good father at the same time. Michael had always been the steady one. Even as a kid, he was the type who lined up his shoes, folded his clothes, did what he said he would do without needing applause. When he told you something was handled, it was handled. That didn't change when he grew up. It just made him easier to use. He met Jennifer when he was building his startup. Long hours, tight margins, stress that crawled into your bones and stayed there. She came in smiling, supportive, saying all the right things, said she believed in him, said she wanted to build something together, Said she didn't mind that money was tight for now. That phrase should have been the warning. Michael worked. Jennifer managed. That was the division. He handled the product, the clients, the late nights. She handled the books, the paperwork, the accounts. She told him it made sense. She was better with numbers. He believed her because he wanted to, because trusting your spouse feels like the bare minimum of a functioning marriage. When the business started making real money, Michael didn't upgrade his life. Same car, same clothes, same habit of bringing leftovers home in the same battered lunch container. Jennifer, on the other hand, discovered boutique shopping, spa appointments, and the kind of restaurants where the menu doesn't list prices. Michael noticed. He mentioned it once, just once. She cried, said he was accusing her, said she felt unappreciated, said she was sacrificing too, holding the household together while he played entrepreneur. Michael apologized. He always did. That was his reflex. De-escalate. Smooth it over. Keep the peace. Peace is expensive when you're the only one paying for it. Then came the house. Jennifer said it would be smarter if it was in her name only. Tax reasons, liability protection, business risk. She used words that sounded informed enough to scare him and vague enough that he couldn't challenge them without sounding ignorant. She slid the papers across the table one night while the boys were asleep. Michael hesitated. She sighed, rolled her eyes, asked him why he didn't trust her. He signed. That's how it always starts. Not with a gun, not with a threat, with a pen and the promise that this is all for the family. Michael worked harder after that. Longer hours, more pressure. He started seeing a therapist, not because he was unstable, but because he was drowning and trying to stay upright for his kids. He didn't tell Jennifer. He didn't want another argument. He just wanted to be functional. She found out anyway. And instead of seeing a man trying to manage stress, she saw leverage. 3 months before I found him in that parking lot, Jennifer left. Or, more accurately, she waited until Michael left for work, and then executed an exit strategy like she'd been planning it for years. Locks changed, a restraining order waiting, papers already filed. Michael stood on his own porch, staring at a door he technically owned, but couldn't open anymore. The restraining order said he was unstable, dangerous, that she feared for her safety and the children's well-being. It listed text messages he'd never sent, emails he didn't recognize, witnesses who'd noticed concerning behavior. Her parents signed statements. Friends echoed the story. Everyone suddenly remembered Michael as volatile, controlling, erratic. The judge saw a pattern, or at least, that's what the paperwork made it look like. Michael didn't fight it, not at first. He was still in shock, still assuming logic would step in at any moment and correct the mistake. That's what rational people believe right before the system crushes them. Then came the accounts. The business money was gone. Not missing, not misplaced. Gone. Transferred in clean, deliberate steps to an account belonging to Jennifer's father, labeled as a loan. No agreement, no terms, no signatures beyond hers. Michael asked her about it through his lawyer. She said it was discussed. She said he knew. She said he'd agreed. She was lying, and she knew it. But lies carry weight when they're written down and repeated by people with money. The custody hearing was fast, brutal, clinical. Jennifer cried, talked about fear, talked about protecting her boys. Her lawyer painted Michael as unstable, unemployed, unfit, a man who couldn't even house his own children. Michael stood there alone, trying to defend himself without resources, without documentation, without the benefit of being believed. The court ordered supervised visitation, twice a week, at Jennifer's parents' house, with her mother taking notes like it was a lab experiment. Michael lost the house, lost the business, lost his kids, lost his credibility. What he didn't lose was his sense of responsibility. He didn't disappear. He didn't drink. He didn't rage. He took whatever work he could find, slept in his car so he could stay close to the boys, showered at the gym, told his sons they were on an adventure because 5-year-olds don't need to know how close their father is to breaking. By the time I found him, he hadn't eaten a real meal in days. He'd been saving what little he had for the kids. That's the part that still makes my jaw tighten. Michael didn't sacrifice because he was weak. He sacrificed because that's what good men do when they think endurance will eventually be rewarded. They think if they just hold on long enough, someone will notice the truth. They're wrong. Sitting there across from him, listening to him explain all of this like it was a report, I realized something that made my hands curl into fists under the table. Jennifer didn't just leave him. She dismantled him, methodically, legally, quietly, and she did it using the very qualities Michael was proud of. His patience, his trust, his refusal to make things ugly. By the time he finished talking, my coffee was cold. The airport noise felt distant, like I was underwater. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I understood the full cost of what he'd sacrificed. His money, his reputation, his home, and almost his children. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not anger yet, something colder, more precise. Because sacrifice only looks noble when it isn't exploited, and someone had taken my son's sacrifice and turned it into a weapon. The violation wasn't the restraining order. It wasn't the emptied accounts. It wasn't even the supervised visits. Those were just paperwork. Weapons. Sure, but clean ones. Impersonal. The kind people hide behind and call the process. The real violation came later. It came the first time I went with Michael to one of those supervised visits at her parents' house. Her mother's place looked like a brochure. Oakville money. Wide driveway, trim hedges, everything beige and expensive and designed to look harmless. The kind of house that convinces judges you're looking at stability before anyone even opens their mouth. We were buzzed in like delivery drivers. Jennifer wasn't there. She didn't need to be. Her mother handled the surveillance. Patricia Whitmore, late 60s, perfect posture, tight smile. Notebook already open before we even sat down. Just routine, she said, tapping her pen. Court order. Michael nodded. Said nothing. He always followed rules, even the ones designed to break him. The boys ran to him the second they saw him. No hesitation, no fear, no confusion. They wrapped their arms around his legs and nearly knocked him over. Dad! That's when I saw Patricia's jaw tighten. Michael knelt down and hugged them back, carefully, like he was afraid too much love might be interpreted as aggression. They played on the floor, built towers, laughed, talked about school. Normal kids, normal father. Nothing even remotely resembling the monster Jennifer's lawyer had described. Patricia wrote anyway, constantly, every laugh, every raised voice. Every moment Michael shifted position, her pen scratched faster. At one point, Oliver tripped and started crying. Michael scooped him up automatically, held him close, whispered to him. Oliver calmed down in seconds. Patricia cleared her throat loudly. Please remember to maintain appropriate physical boundaries, she said. Michael froze. He slowly set his own crying son back on the floor. I felt something snap in my chest. After the visit, Michael showed me the report Patricia submitted to the court. It didn't resemble reality in any way. Father appeared agitated. He raised his voice. Children seemed withdrawn. Father demonstrated controlling tendencies. I stared at the page. These are lies, I said flatly. Michael shrugged. That's what she's been doing since the beginning. That night, in the hotel, he showed me something else. He'd started recording the visits. Audio only, legal, consent posted on the wall. He didn't do it out of spite. He did it because he was running out of ways to defend himself. We listened together. The recordings were calm, soft, full of laughter, kids asking for snacks, Michael saying, "Good job, and that's okay, and I'm proud of you." Nothing even close to the reports. That's when I understood. This wasn't about custody. This was about narrative control. Jennifer and her parents weren't just taking Michael's children. They were rewriting his identity in real time, knowing the court would believe typed words over lived truth. And then came the call that finally stripped away any illusion of accident. Michael's lawyer called late one afternoon. Voice careful. Practiced. "Jennifer is requesting a modification," he said. "She wants to reduce visitation." Michael went pale. "On what grounds?" he asked. "Continued instability," the lawyer replied. "Based on the supervision reports." I felt heat rush behind my eyes. "She's punishing him," I said into the phone. "Because he's still standing." There was a pause. "Off the record," the lawyer said quietly. Yes, that was the moment I stopped thinking like a father and started thinking like someone who had nothing left to lose, because I finally saw the full shape of the violation. Jennifer didn't just take Michael's money. She didn't just take his house. She didn't just take his reputation. She tried to teach his children that their father was dangerous. She tried to make them grow up believing the man who tucked them in, fed them, slept in his car to stay near them, was someone to be watched. That kind of damage doesn't heal. That kind of lie becomes permanent if nobody burns it down fast enough. I looked at Michael that night, sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, shoulders slumped, listening to another report that painted him as a threat to his own sons. And I realized something cold and unmistakable. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was psychological warfare. And the moment they decided to weaponize my grandsons against their father, they crossed a line they couldn't uncross. I didn't confront Jennifer. I didn't call her parents. I didn't raise my voice or threaten anyone. That's what they were expecting. Instead, I did what people like them never take seriously until it's too late. I sat down. I shut up. And I started collecting facts. The first call I made was to Paul, my lawyer in Vancouver. I'd known him for 30 years. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't posture. He listened. When I finished talking, there was a long pause on the line. "This isn't a custody case," he said finally. "This is coordinated financial abuse. And if even half of what you're saying checks out, your daughter-in-law didn't just overplay her hand. She left fingerprints everywhere." That was the first crack. Paul didn't touch Ontario Family Court himself, but he knew who did. He gave me a name. One name. Rebecca Hart. High conflict custody. Financial coercion. People who win without shouting. Her retainer was obscene. I paid it without blinking. Rebecca didn't waste time trying to comfort anyone. She asked questions. Sharp ones. Dates. Transfers. Account numbers. Who said what and when. She didn't care how unfair it felt. She cared how provable it was. By the end of the first meeting, she leaned back in her chair and said something that finally made me smile. "They didn't just lie," she said. "They documented their lies. That's the mistake." We started with the money. Rebecca hired a forensic accountant. Quiet guy, no opinions, just numbers. He went through the startup's accounts line by line, then followed every transfer out like a blood trail. What he found was surgical. Jennifer hadn't emptied the business all at once. That would have raised alarms. She drained it slowly. 500 here, 1,000 there. Then larger amounts once no one was watching. Everything routed through personal accounts before landing in her father's. No loan agreement, no repayment schedule, no documentation beyond the wire labels she typed herself. Nearly $280,000. "That's embezzlement," the accountant said, not looking up from his screen. "Clean and simple." Then we went after the mental health angle. Michael's therapy records were a gift. Not because they were dramatic, because they weren't. No instability, no aggression. Just a man dealing with pressure in the healthiest way possible. We subpoenaed the witnesses Jennifer used. One by one, they folded. Her friend admitted she never saw anything. The neighbor admitted he assumed things. The texts? Digital forensics showed they'd been altered. Timestamps didn't line up. Metadata said they were created on a computer, fabricated. That's when Rebecca stopped playing defense. She filed motions, emergency ones, custody modification, termination of supervised visits, fraud referrals. She submitted the forensic accounting report, not just to family court, but to the police fraud unit and the tax authorities. Jennifer's father went from concerned grandparent to person of interest in under a week. When the custody hearing finally came, Jennifer walked in confident, smiling, her parents on either side of her like armor. Michael sat next to me, quiet, hands shaking slightly, but upright. Rebecca dismantled them piece by piece. She didn't accuse. She demonstrated. She laid out the money trail, the fake texts, the contradictory supervision reports versus the audio recordings, the therapy records that proved the exact opposite of instability. Then she put Jennifer on the stand. Watching her try to explain herself was painful in a way she didn't deserve. Verbal loan, forgotten details, deleted evidence, accidental transfers. Every answer made it worse. When the judge finally spoke, the room went dead quiet. She didn't yell. She didn't scold. She corrected. Custody modified, 50-50. Effective immediately. Supervised visits terminated. Full repayment ordered. Assets subject to seizure. Fraud referred for criminal review. Jennifer made a sound I still remember. Not a cry, more like air leaving a punctured tire. Her mother stood up. The judge shut her down without looking at her. Outside the courtroom, Michael collapsed against the wall, like his bones had been holding him upright on pure will alone. Nathan and Oliver ran to him, wrapped their arms around his neck. No hesitation. No fear. That was the real verdict. The criminal side took longer. It always does. Her father was charged. Jennifer took a plea, paid back most of the money to avoid prison. Her reputation didn't survive it. Neither did her narrative. They didn't just lose the case. They lost control of the story. The courtroom emptied fast after the ruling. Lawyers packed up. Spectators moved on to their own disasters. That's how it always is. Someone's life explodes, and everyone else still has lunch plans. Michael didn't move. He was crouched against the wall, head down, hands on his knees like he'd just finished a marathon he never trained for. I stood over him, not saying anything, because there was nothing left to explain. The fight was over. The damage was already done. All that remained was the weight coming off. Nathan and Oliver came running down the hallway with a social worker trailing behind them. They didn't hesitate. They didn't look confused. They didn't look scared. They ran straight to their father. "Dad!" Michael dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around them so tightly, I thought for a second he might break. He didn't cry loud. He cried the way men do when something inside them finally unlocks. Silent. Shaking. Relieved. "Are we going home now?" Nathan asked. Michael nodded, his voice barely working. "Yeah, buddy. We're going home." Jennifer watched from across the hall. No tears. No fight left. Just a hollow look, like someone who finally realized the game ended and the score was permanent. Her father wouldn't look at anyone. 3 months later, the charges came down. Fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, the kind of words that don't wash off once they're attached to your name. Jennifer took a deal, paid back most of the money, avoided jail, lost everything else that mattered. Michael didn't celebrate. He rebuilt. New business, new contracts, lawyers reviewing every line, no trust without verification, no signatures without witnesses, the kind of habits men only learn after being burned all the way to the bone. He got the boys more than half the time. Not because the court favored him, because Jennifer stopped fighting. Turns out parental alienation takes effort, and effort disappears fast when there's no money left to fund it. I stayed in Toronto, rented a small condo near Michael's place, Not because I needed to. Because I wanted to be close. I see my grandsons 3 times a week. Park days. Homework nights. Chess games that turn into arguments because 5-year-olds hate losing. One night, about a year after I found my son in that parking lot, we sat on my balcony while the boys played inside. Michael stared out at the city for a long time before speaking. I thought I was the problem, he said. For months, I thought maybe they were right, that something was wrong with me. I nodded. That's how it works. If you repeat a lie long enough, it starts to sound like self-reflection. He looked at me. You didn't believe it. I've known you since the day you were born, I said. I don't need a court to tell me who my son is. He swallowed hard. If you hadn't shown up, he said quietly, I don't know how this would have ended. I knew. I just didn't say it. Inside? Oliver yelled. Grandpa, come play Jenga! I stood up. Duty calls. As I walked inside and sat down on the floor with them, watching those wooden blocks stack higher and higher. Oliver looked at me and grinned. Don't let it fall, he said. I steadied the tower with 2 fingers. Careful. Precise. I won't, I said. And I meant it. Not the tower. Everything else.